The fluorescent lights above buzzed with a faint, uneven hum, casting a flicker that seemed to vibrate with quiet tension. Natasha Fields sat stiffly, eyes fixed on her lap, her hands tangled together in a nervous knot. Her thumbs worked over her knuckles, now pale from the pressure. Though it was the middle of July, the Brooklyn family court felt cold, or maybe it was just her nerves icing over. Across the table, Robert leaned back with the smug relaxation of a man who believed the world owed him something. His suit was expensive, navy, tailored, worn deliberately to make a statement. His cologne, still that same blend she'd picked out for him last Christmas, lingered in the air, a bittersweet trace of something lost. It stung. The courtroom wasn't empty. A few others sat along the far benches, waiting silently for their cases. A weary bailiff stood near the door, chewing the inside of his cheek in bored detachment. Natasha barely registered them. Her eyes kept drifting to Robert's hands, well-groomed, precise, tapping out a steady rhythm against a thick wooden table. Those same hands had once held hers through subway rides, snowstorms, and sweltering summers in their tiny first apartment in Bed-Stuy. Now they seemed foreign. She could recall every harsh detail from the past month. The divorce papers had come in a thick manila envelope, delivered by a stranger who didn't bother meeting her gaze. Robert had been parked across the street in his BMW, engine idling, eyes like glass. No warning, no argument. When she stepped out onto the sidewalk, holding the envelope close to her chest, he lowered the window just enough to speak. "Good luck starting over, with nothing," he said, flat and uninterested. That was the last time he had addressed her directly, until now. The clerk's voice rang out through the courtroom, cutting through the hush like a blade. Docket number 2217. Fields versus Fields. Natasha stiffened at the sound of her married name. Tamika Johnson, her attorney, leaned in and gave her shoulder a reassuring squeeze. "Deep breath, Natasha," she whispered. "This isn't him celebrating a win. Today we fight for what's yours." The heavy door opened, and Judge Whitaker stepped in. His robe swayed as he climbed into his seat, his face lined with age, eyes sharp beneath the fatigue. He studied them both for a long moment, lingering slightly on Natasha. His expression didn't shift, but she felt exposed, like he could read the weight of the years etched into her bones. Robert's attorney, Mr. Goodman, rose. He wore smugness like a second suit, his gray three-piece fit just right. "Your Honor, we're here today to finalize the dissolution of marriage between my client, Robert Fields, and the respondent, Natasha Fields." He began. "The terms are straightforward. A prenuptial agreement grants Mr. Fields sole ownership of all current and future assets. Mrs. Fields receives a modest settlement." His tone was smooth, calculated, almost condescending. Natasha felt her throat tighten. Tamika stood with practiced confidence, her black blazer sharp and commanding. "Your Honor, we challenge both the validity and enforceability of the prenup. Mrs. Fields made substantial contributions during the business's early development. Furthermore, the agreement was never properly filed. There is no notary seal, no witness signature. We ask the court to consider not only the letter of the law, but the full picture, the sacrifices made, and the truth behind how these assets were built." Robert didn't react, keeping his eyes forward, away from Natasha. But the judge lifted a hand to halt any more back and forth. "We'll begin with testimony," he said. "Mrs. Fields, please rise." Natasha's legs trembled as she stood. Her heart pounded so loudly she was sure the bailiff could hear it. She began to speak, her voice unsteady at first, but strengthened with every sentence. "When Robert launched his company, we had nothing. I worked multiple jobs to cover rent. I designed the first website, handled his early clients, and managed our finances because he didn't know how. When an investor finally showed interest, it was me who convinced him to believe in us." Her gaze shifted to Robert, whose face remained unreadable. "Everything we had, we created together. That life, it didn't just happen. I gave up my own career to help him chase his. I was the foundation." Mr. Goodman folded his arms, his lips twisting into a smug curve. "But your name was never on the LLC, correct? You weren't legally listed as a partner." "That was Robert's choice," Natasha answered without blinking. "He said it would protect us. I trusted him." The judge nodded slightly, jotting notes on his pad. Mr. Fields, your response? Robert stood, collecting the attention of everyone in the room. He spoke with casual assurance, as if the outcome had already been decided. Yes, Natasha was supportive early on, he said. But the company was always my project. My ideas, my risks, my sleepless nights. She helped answer emails. She kept the house in order. But the business? That was mine. He pushed a folder across the table. The prenup speaks for itself. Tamika cut in quickly. Your Honor, we maintain this document is incomplete. It's missing both a notary and a witness signature. We also have proof it was never filed with the county. Judge Whitaker took the document, holding it up to the light. His expression remained neutral, but the tension in the room shifted. Natasha could feel it, like something about a crack. I'll determine its legitimacy, the judge said. Robert returned to his seat with dramatic flair, throwing Natasha a sideways glance, half smug, half anxious. Beneath the table, his knee bounced uncontrollably, betraying nerves he tried to hide. Witnesses were brought forward. Robert's current CFO took the stand, answering questions with clipped formality. Yes, Mrs. Fields was around early on, he said, but she wasn't present at board meetings. All key decisions, legal and financial, were made by Mr. Fields. Tamika responded with a stack of evidence. Emails, social media posts, messages showing Natasha negotiating contracts and participating in strategic planning during the company's infancy. Next came Natasha's sister, Yvette. Her voice trembled as she spoke, emotion tight in her throat. I watched my sister give everything to that marriage, she said. She lost herself in it. Robert took all she had to offer and never looked back. She was there when that company was just an idea on a laptop at our kitchen table. Tears stung Natasha's eyes, but she held them back. More evidence followed. Bank statements showing shared accounts used for business purchases. Photographs of Natasha at launch events. Business cards printed with both of their names. With every new detail, Robert's confidence eroded. His jaw tightened. His lips thinned. And Natasha, for the first time in weeks, started to believe she might finally be heard. The hours dragged on. Outside, the sun slipped lower, casting dusky blue streaks across the courtroom floor. Natasha's body ached from holding herself upright for so long, but she stayed tall, refusing to show weakness in front of the watching eyes. Everyone seemed to be waiting for her to fold, to falter. At last, Judge Whitaker called for a recess. Natasha found herself alone in the corridor, back pressed against the cold tile wall, her breath catching in her throat. Tamika appeared at her side, wordlessly offering a bottle of water. He's off balance, Tamika murmured, her tone low and measured. You did exactly what we needed. Just hold on a little longer. Natasha nodded slowly, forcing herself to swallow the thick lump that had formed in her throat. When the proceedings resumed, something in the courtroom had changed. The tension had shifted. Robert no longer looked invincible. His posture was more guarded, his expression less certain. Judge Whitaker's gaze seemed to linger on him, assessing more deeply now, as if weighing something that couldn't be spoken. Mr. Goodman cleared his throat and called Robert back to testify. Mr. Fields, can you describe your financial standing at the time of your marriage to Mrs. Fields? Robert's response was clipped, his defensiveness barely masked. I had some debt, but I had big plans. I always knew I'd be successful. Natasha helped, sure, but it was my ambition that got us here. Tamika stood again, ready to strike with precision. If you were so financially confident, she asked, why did you rely on Natasha's income to cover rent? Why use joint funds for startup expenses? Why is she listed as the emergency contact on your company's original paperwork? Robert hesitated, his words faltering. That was just convenience. She was there, yes, but it was always my idea, my dream. The judge's voice sliced clean through the tension. Let's turn our attention to the prenuptial agreement. Mr. Fields, can you present verified proof that this document was properly filed with the clerk's office in accordance with New York state law? Goodman shuffled through his folder awkwardly. We have a copy, Your Honor. The original It should be with the county. Without a word, Tamika slid a document across the table. This is a certified statement from the county clerk's office, she said. There is no record of this agreement being filed in 2014 or any year after. Additionally, the document lacks both a witness signature and notarization. A hush swept through the courtroom. Even the bailiff straightened, his demeanor sharpening. Robert's complexion turned pale. For the first time, his fingers stilled. Judge Whitaker leaned back in his chair, his fingers steepled, his gaze sharp and cutting. Mr. Fields, this is not a minor oversight. The law is clear. A prenuptial agreement must be signed by witnesses, notarized, and properly filed to carry any legal authority. Without those elements, it's legally void. Robert opened his mouth to respond, but his voice cracked. Your Honor, this isn't fair. She's just... Enough, the judge said, raising a hand. The room was silent. Natasha could hear the thunder of her own pulse. She looked directly at Robert. This time, his eyes met hers, and for the first time, she didn't see arrogance. She saw fear. The judge continued, voice firm. Given all presented evidence, emails, financial records, credible witness testimony, and the absence of a legally valid prenuptial agreement, this court finds in favor of Mrs. Fields. The business assets, properties, and holdings shall be awarded in full to Mrs. Fields. There will be no division of those assets. Mr. Fields, you are entitled to a portion of the joint savings account and ownership of one vehicle. Everything else is granted to Mrs. Fields. The business, in its entirety, belongs to her. The air seemed to collapse out of the room. Goodman stammered, searching for an objection, but the judge had already turned back to the paperwork, pen in hand, finalizing the ruling. Robert sat motionless. His face shifted through shock, disbelief, and finally, blankness. His usual swagger was gone. The smug glint in his eyes had vanished. He opened his mouth again, but no words came. Natasha didn't look away. Her expression was calm, unreadable, resolute. The clerk handed the judge the last documents. He signed them with deliberate pressure, then looked straight at Natasha. You may sit, Mrs. Fields. This court's decision is final. She sank into her chair slowly, unsure if her legs would hold. Her hands rested flat against the table, fingers no longer shaking. Across from her, Robert remained still. His attorney leaned in, whispering something urgent. Robert didn't react. He just stared ahead, into nothing. Judge Whitaker brought the session to a close. The bailiff called for order as the crowd began to stir. Natasha didn't move. She could feel the eyes, the judgment, the curiosity, but none of it reached her. Something inside her had settled. Heavy, yes, but clear. Final. Robert still hadn't stirred. His hands lay limp on the tabletop, the pen he'd held now resting on the floor at his feet. He looked shrunken, less like a man, more like a hollow outline of one. His empire, his dominance, had slipped right through his fingers. Tamika stood quietly behind Natasha, offering no words, just placing a steady hand on her shoulder. Natasha finally rose, methodically gathering her bag. Her movements were slow, intentional. She gave Robert one last glance. Their eyes locked for a fleeting moment. No anger, no sadness, just silence. There was nothing left to say. She turned and walked toward the doors as the courtroom emptied behind her. The final sound she heard before stepping into the hallway was a thick wooden door clicking shut behind her. It sealed more than just a room. It closed a decade, and it closed a chapter on everything Robert thought he could keep